Welcome to World History Channel. Today we are going to be looking at the life of Mary, the first Queen Regnant of England, infamous for being known as Bloody Mary. Mary was born on 18th February 1516 at Greenwich Palace, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII. Contrary to later beliefs, Henry VIII was pleased with her birth, proudly displaying the infant Mary to visiting ambassadors and noblemen. It was only years later, with Mary as his sole legitimate offspring, that Henry began his desperate search for a son. In 1525, she was named Princess of Wales by her father, although the lack of official documents suggests she was never formally invested. She then held court at Ludlow Castle. Mary's life was radically disrupted, however, by her father's new marriage to Anne Boleyn. As early as the 1520s, Henry had planned to divorce Catherine in order to marry Anne, claiming that since Catherine had been his deceased brother's wife, her union with Henry was incestuous. The Pope, however, refused to recognize Henry's right to divorce Catherine, even after the divorce was legalized in England. In 1534, Henry broke with Rome and established the Church of England. The allegation of incest, in effect, made Mary illegitimate. Anne, the new queen who bore the king a daughter, Elizabeth, forbade Mary access to her parents, stripped her of her title of princess, and forced her to act as a lady-in-waiting to the infant Elizabeth. Mary never saw her mother again, though despite great danger, they corresponded secretly. Anne's hatred pursued Mary so relentlessly that Mary feared execution, but having her mother's courage and all her father's stubbornness, she would not admit to the illegitimacy of her birth, nor would she enter a convent when ordered to do so. After Anne fell under Henry's displeasure, he offered to pardon Mary if she would acknowledge him as the head of the Church of England and admit to the incestuous illegality of his marriage to her mother. She refused to do so until her cousin, the Emperor Charles, persuaded her to give in, an act she would later regret deeply. Henry was now reconciled to her and gave her a household befitting her position. She became godmother to Prince Edward, Henry's son, by Jane Seymour, the third queen. Mary was now the most important European princess. Although plain, she was a popular figure. However, her movements were severely restricted. When Henry married Catherine Howard, however, Mary was granted permission to return to court, and in 1544, although still considered illegitimate, she was granted succession to the throne after Edward and any other legitimate children who might be born to Henry. After Henry's death, Edward ruled for just 7 years. Since Edward was still a child, rule passed to a regency council dominated by Protestants, who attempted to establish their faith throughout the country. For example, the Act of Uniformity in 1549 prescribed Protestant rites for church services such as the use of Thomas Cranmer's Book of Common Prayer. Mary remained faithful to Roman Catholicism and defiantly celebrated traditional Mass in her own chapel. The last year of Edward's life was one of near constant pain and suffering. Various illnesses have been suggested, consumption being the most likely. He had never been of robust health, unlike his father, and the Protestant councillors did all they could to prolong his life. Edward's death was inevitable, but they needed every available moment to prevent Catholic Mary from ascending to the throne. On the advice of his councillors, especially John Dudley, Earl of Warwick, Edward excluded his half-sisters Mary and Elizabeth from succession. Instead, he willed the throne to Lady Jane Grey. She was Dudley's daughter-in-law and granddaughter of Henry VIII's younger sister, Mary Tudor, and thus a remote claimant to the English throne. Upon the death of Edward in 1553, Mary fled to Norfolk, as Lady Jane Grey had seized the throne and was recognized as queen for a few days. The country, however, considered Mary the rightful ruler, and within some days she made a triumphal entry into London. Mary and Elizabeth rode into England's capital side by side, one as a queen and the other as a queen-in-waiting. She was crowned in the Westminster Abbey on Sunday, the 1st October, 1553. Both Anne of Cleves and the future Queen Elizabeth followed the Queen as she processed into the Abbey. Mary's coronation was naturally unique, given she was the first woman crowned as monarch in her own right. So during the ceremony, she held two scepters, the one of the king, the other bearing a dove, which by custom is given to the Queen consort. It would have been the same dove-topped scepter her mother, Catherine of Aragon, held during her coronation, alongside husband Henry VIII in 1509. The ceremony was conducted by the Bishop of Winchester, as the Archbishop of Canterbury had been imprisoned in the Tower of London. She also chose not to use the ancient coronation chair for the crowning, as she thought this might have been polluted by Edward. A new one is said to have been sent to her by the Pope, but it is not known what happened to that. Mary longed to bring her people back to the Church of Rome. To achieve this end, she was determined to marry Philip II of Spain, the son of the Emperor Charles V, and 11 years her junior. Parliament, at odds with her, was offended by her discourtesy to the delegates pleading against the Spanish marriage. "My marriage is my own affair," she said. When in 1554 it became clear that she would marry Philip, a Protestant insurrection broke out under the leadership of Sir Thomas Wyatt. Alarmed by Wyatt's rapid advance towards London, Mary made a magnificent speech rousing citizens by the thousands to fight for her. Wyatt was defeated and executed, and Mary married Philip, restored the Catholic creed, and revived the laws against heresy. For 3 years, Protestant bodies dangled from gibbets, and heretics were relentlessly executed, some 300 being burnt at the stake. Henceforth, the Queen, now known as Bloody Mary, was hated, her Spanish husband distrusted and slandered, and she herself blamed for the vicious slaughter. An unpopular, unsuccessful war with France, in which Spain was England's ally, lost Calais, England's last toehold in Europe. Still childless, sick, and grief-stricken, she was further depressed by a series of false pregnancies. Having no living heir, Mary was forced to accept that her half-sister Elizabeth would be her lawful successor. Her reign was cut short by possible ovarian cysts, a uterine cancer, in 1558, and she died in the full knowledge that her half-sister Elizabeth would entirely overturn her attempts at reconciliation with Rome.